Whoa. God, that's awful. I still can't believe I tried to do that for him. Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen. This is the Amazin But True Podcast, not featuring Jake Brown. I will be handling most of the duties alongside Anthony Rivera. Anthony Rivera is filling in. He's today's might be the sub, but I might be looking for a new co-host because Jake has decided that things like weddings are more important than podcasts. Welcome everybody. Listen, things aren't going as planned. Before we get started, of course, got to make sure you guys follow, let everyone else know, share, like. We've got at Figueroa, at Ant Rivera 86, at Andrew Harts. He's going to get props today instead of Jake Brown Radio because he deserves it. That's right, I said it. We're going to get right into it. Just talking about this Met team after 60 games, 30-30, 102 left to go. And the writing's on the wall of what this team needs, Ant. I mean, if you look at everything that's transpired this weekend, it's a perfect example of what has ailed this team throughout the season and what's the biggest difference from this team being a 101 team just a year ago.
Yeah. First off, appreciate you guys having me on today. And unfortunately, it comes at, a time when the Mets are struggling profusely. I mean, you guys were on after the Philly series, and it's like a tale of two homestands.
Yeah.
They swept the Phillies. Offense wasn't great. They got a lot from Mark Canha, who, hasn't really, shown up this season. But, at the opportune time, he came to play. This weekend, it was just like a flat line across the entire offense. The first two games, they scored one run. Today, the offense got, we got a little bit from the offense. And then this was the day that the pitching staff could not handle its duties. So you can never get on the same page with this team. And that's why they are at, like you said, 30-30, 500 team, pretty mediocre right now. And hopefully at some point, they're going to have to turn this around, especially with the schedule this month being very tough. And now they're going into Atlanta, so it even gets tougher.
Yeah, Anthony Rivera again, Subway to Shea podcast. Listen, this is one of those things that you hate to talk about, is that this team has always had an issue, whether it's the starting pitching and then it's the bullpen. If it's not the bullpen, then it's the hitting. If it's not the hitting, then it winds up being, running yourself out of an opportunity to tie a ball game like Nimmo has done, or Alvarez throwing the ball all over the field now because all of a sudden he's been feeling himself ever since the end of that Colorado series where he hits that home run. And ever since that day, and I think, I looked at the notes and what, Jake had in place, but I'm going rogue here. One of my biggest beefs right now is, of course, Alvarez has received a lot of praise because of the way he's been playing and the way he's been hitting. After reaching a high water benchmark of 273 in that Colorado series, since then, he's 1 for 19 right now. 1 for 19. And this is a guy who doesn't want to walk. He will never take a walk. He's swinging, before the pitcher even releases the ball. And right now, because of his mistakes that he's making back behind the dish, he's showing himself to be a rookie in all aspects. And I think that's something that Buck Showalter was asked today. And you could see it in his face. He doesn't want to say it. He doesn't want to bring the kid down. He wants him to keep riding that high. But reality is that he's a rookie and he's going to make mistakes like this. He's overly aggressive at times with trying to, throw runners out, and it's leading to runs. And right now, the way that the offense is not clicking, every run matters. You hate to look back in the game and go, man, we came up one run short because Alvarez threw the ball around. And I think that's one of the things that if you keep looking for, and it's not to put blame, oh yeah, they lost because of him, but this just shows you like he was carrying the team. He was batting 273. And you thought, is he really the second best hitter on this team right now after Pete? Is he going to be the number 5 hole hitter that Pete needs, the protection that he needs? And we haven't seen that either. So he's going through ups and downs. This team is going through ups and downs. And I think it's something has to give to get a level of consistency that 101 team did with all the injuries that they had. They didn't have DeGrom the full season. So there's all those same excuses can be said, but they still found ways to win ball games. And they hit as a cohesive unit, right? I think that is a true statement.
Yeah, the first half of last season was a whole lot different. They didn't rely on so much power wise. There was a lot more of, station to station, but, getting the runner over, sacrifice flies when they needed it, simple base hits to get the runs in. And towards the end of the season, probably at the beginning of September, as soon as they lost Starling Marte, they kind of went in a tailspin, and only really Eduardo Escobar was carrying the offense throughout the
Yeah.
month of September. And now
Mm-hmm.
you look at these guys, they're all having their troubles, including, Francisco Lindor. And, you bring up these kids, you want to see them succeed. And they're all struggling too. Brett Beatty's struggling. I was
Yep.
at the game yesterday. He struck out 3 times.
Yeah.
Mark Vientos, who, he's getting not, the bare minimum of playing time, but in his opportunities, he hasn't been, getting the hits. Maybe he'll go 1 for 3 or get a single here, but that power is not there. It's crazy that the third best power hitter on the team right now is the rookie Francisco Alvarez, and he didn't start the year as a
Right.
starter. So it's crazy to see that, the rest of the team has not been producing, and the fact that these kids have come in and are expected to be the saviors of the team, that shouldn't be that way. I mean, we need Brandon Nimmo, and he struggled yesterday and this past couple weeks. He's been struggling. Alonso has been struggling.
Mm-hmm.
We all know what has happened this weekend with Francisco Lindor.
Lindor. Yep.
Even Jeff McNeil, I think he pretty much had an O for today. It's the whole team has just been struggling mightily offensively, and if those guys are not going, this team's not going anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I think the one big piece of reality, right, is that baseball waits for no one. The Mets have the distinct honor of playing in the National League East, where they're not playing very good baseball in many areas. All these teams are kind of middling right around there. They're underachieving. The Phillies are hugely underachieving. They're 8 games back. The Mets are 5 games back. The Marlins are 3 games back, and they're a young, talented team that starting to believe a little bit that they can not just hang around, but they can do something, in this division. The Braves, of course, are the gold standard. And until somebody knocks them off that perch, they are going to be the gold standard. I know we were quick to go and say, you got Verlander, you got Scherzer, you got Edwin Diaz, you got Alon, you got everything you need. We're going to win the whole thing. We're going to win First off, you have to find a way to stay on par with the Braves. And they have proven with all their injuries that they have a young nucleus and they can play long ball, but they also are just up and down that lineup. They're so balanced. I mean, d'Arnaud is even contributing with the bat as well this season. That's something that I think people don't understand, that when you're counting on just 1 or 2 guys to carry the load, and it's been Lindor's RBIs, not his hitting, but his RBIs, and Alonso's home runs, that have been, carrying the team for the most part. It hasn't been much else. And even when they were making these miraculous comebacks, right? Again, when we saw against Tampa Bay, and they found a way to just ride that wave, it was the bullpen that kept blowing these leads. Every time they got the lead, the bullpen would blow it on them. So it's one of those situations that I love, I laugh at. It's the ham, no burger, peanut butter, no jelly. Just, you can't do 2 things right that are going to help your team win. You have to do at least 2 of the 3 things right, whether it's defense, offense, or pitching, to find a way to really make your mark, keep your mark, and be a consistent team that is able to find ways to win when you only score 1 run or whether you score 10 runs. And that's the thing that I think the Mets, they have that nucleus that has done it last year, yes, and they have that, the ability to hit the ball out of the park in certain areas, but I don't want those guys. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it was the getting guys over, getting guys in, the sack fly, the small ball mentality that sometimes gets lost because they start looking back and they're, probably, I would say they're probably around 10th, if that, in the National League in home runs. And everybody's, why doesn't this team hit for more power? Well, they don't have to win ball games. You don't have to hit for more power. You just have to hit the ball, and especially timely hits when there's runners in scoring position.
Yeah, there does not seem to be this balance. It seems to
Yeah.
happen so often with the Mets. They'll have a year where they'll have a really good pitching staff, and then they can't hit. I mean, we can go back to DeGrom, they never scored for.
Yep.
Santana, they never scored for. I mean, it even goes back to the 60s with Tom Seaver. They didn't really score for him either, and he still was
Hmm.
able to carve out a Hall of Fame career. I mean, there needs to be a balance. We saw that balance. We saw that balance last year, and they were so good at the beginning of last year. It took the Braves to go historic to
Hmm.
win the division by a game, although both teams had the same record. So this team needs to find some sort of balance where they can get the pitching staff. And I'm giving the starting pitching staff a little bit of time. I want to see Jose Quintana get back and see if they're able to do anything with that. Maybe that way that they could do this 6-man rotation where,
Hmm.
Kodai Senga doesn't have to pitch like he pitched today on 4 days rest. I know the reasoning why they did it. I know they wanted to get him at home twice because his ERA at home was 1 point some. I don't remember
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
exact, but
Yeah.
it's like
It's below.
1 point something, where
Yep.
his ERA away is probably in the 5 or 6s. So they wanted to get him home twice. You don't want him going into Atlanta and getting that blown out. But at some point, these guys are going to have to give you 5, 6 innings consistently,
Hmm.
nightly. I mean, it
Yeah.
can't be every other game where, Verlander has a really good game and then he gets through like 4 innings and we have to go to the bullpen and, see the Dominic Leones come in who came in today and you got Brigham pitching every day. I never thought at the start of this season that I would be seeing Dominic Leone and Jeff Brigham pitching every single day, every
Yeah.
day.
Oh
And
no.
even Steven Nagosic, who pitched very well today, nice bounce back from him.
Hmm.
I wanted him to be in this bullpen, but I didn't want him to be the long man. I didn't see him as that part. I thought he was a 1 inning guy that would come in, and they're really missing Trevor Williams's what he did for us last year. That whole thing that he did for us last year was very
Hmm.
underrated.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things throughout this season is that you talk about if the starters aren't going to be able to give you the depth, then you're going to start getting relievers exposed. Brigham is a guy that I've talked about that he was doing very, very well until you put him in a pressure situation. It's always easier when you're up or down a few and you got some leeway. But when you're holding a 1-run lead or it's a tie game, like we see with Leon, Leon has not pitched in a game that the Mets have won yet. I think that was a crazy
No,
stat to hear about. And I'm not, trust me, I'm not getting on him because I went 43 straight. I think it's a major league record still. I think I went 43 games in the middle of my career with Milwaukee and Pittsburgh. I pitched in 43 games that were not in a win because I was that long man. I was that guy that, could eat up innings. And if the starter got knocked out, I was going to go ahead and pitch. But I went like 43 games without pitching in a game that we won. And, does that wear on you? Sure. At the time, was I thinking about it? No, I was thinking, man, I'm getting a lot of opportunities. The
yeah.
bad part is that we were sucking. So that was why I was making my opportunities. So I think now we're going to start to see is they have to find a way to get some kind of bullpen help. I know they're slim pickings right now because everybody is still in the race. The wild card is still wide open. So they got to find another arm or another arm or two. And what is it going to take to get a top level arm? Because there's so many teams that are still in the race. I think, and any names that you can think of that would help this bullpen, because again, the names that we have here, we weren't even expecting to read those names. Those are nice spring training names to have. Now we're
Mhm.
counting on these guys every day.
Yeah. And I think that the Mets as a front office needs to adjust to this new playoff format and trade deadline format because a lot of teams are still in it close to the trade deadline. And if you want some of their players, you're going to have to give up something. Now, look at what we got Vogel back and had to give up Colin Holderman. And look at what he's doing in Pittsburgh. Look at
Yes.
Pittsburgh right now.
Mm-hmm.
That hurts, seeing that whole thing go down. The Mets are going to have to figure out a way. They at the trade deadline, all we got was Michael Givens, and that did not help at all.
That didn't help at all. He's gone and off to greener pastures. And now you look also, remember the JD Davis trade. So this front office has not done well when it's come to trades and acquiring talent or even evaluating the level of talent. JD Davis right now and Michael Conforto are a two-man wrecking crew over with San Francisco. They're leading the team in RBIs. I think JD Davis is leading the team in batting average. He was a guy that could hit lefties. That's what you went and got rough for, wasn't that? JD Davis could hit lefties. And he also, just never got the opportunity to play because there was always a sexier option. Let's go out and they got Escobar and made him a role player. His role was to be the right-handed DH or come off the bench. And he wasn't used to it. This guy's been trying to prove that he's a major league starter. And then you kind of take that opportunity away from San Francisco. They were like, hey, it's job is yours. You go out there and perform. And all he's done is perform. So he's surely missed. I really liked JD Davis in a Met uniform. So let's move on to Kodai Senga, pitching on 4 days rest. We did see, yes, he had a bad outing. And I let me speak to this first because I can tell you what it's like. And does the extra rest help? 9 out of 10 times it doesn't hurt, but he's been so used to doing that way. Yes, this was the first time, but I can't blame it on that. What we knew about Senga is he's hot and cold when it comes to his command, right? Part of having swing and miss stuff is that if they don't swing, they're not missing. So we saw the Toronto Blue Jays, who are normally free swingers, lay off a lot of pitches. Even when they got called, who was it? Brandon Belt. They got 2 high fastballs that were out of the strike zone. He got rung up on both those. Those were balls. And for him to hold off on those and then hit a pitch that almost hit the ground on Leon, it shows how good Brandon Belt can be. I think one of the things that with Kodai Senga is the ghost fork ball disappearing. If you can lay off of it, it's going to be down in the zone. It's going to be out of the strike zone. So that swing and miss goes away. I liken it to a lot where you knew Familia was going to throw a 98-mile-an-hour bowling ball sinker. And if you literally held the bat on your shoulder, he probably was not going to throw 3 strikes out of the 4 pitches he was throwing to you before he walked you. So I think I can't chalk it up to the 4 days rest. I can't. It's just not. It's just one time. Hopefully it's a one-off. And they have a way of getting him the rest because I think he's been so steady outside of this one game. And to pull him so early, only 68 pitches, I think it was a panic move and you just wanted to kind of put bubble wrap around Senga for the day. Okay, he doesn't have it. Let's put him away. Let's make sure he's okay for the next start. But I think he and the rest of the staff, there's got to be something. There should have been a plan in place from spring training. That, hey, we're going to need to go 6-man rotation regardless. And yes, injuries, you lose 2 of your starters before you leave spring training with Verlander and Quintana going down. And it changed everything. But I think I would have still had so much more depth at the AAA level that Lucchesi came up and his first outing was great. And then it kind of diminished after that. But Lucchesi is a guy that you need a guy who can do that. Peterson just did not perform. If Peterson or Lucchesi was performing half decent, if they could give you a 4.5 ERA and 6 innings, you bring them up right away just to have that consistency so that the older 2 aces could, take their time, have that extra day. Senga can have his extra day. And then you kind of ride the hot hand. If you need a guy to just stay on the 5-day rotation, we see that Tyler McGill may be the guy that can't take the extra rest. That's something that should be managed a little bit better because it looks like it's hurting the staff overall.
I thought that at the offset of this season, when the season started, that we had great depth with Tyler McGill and David Peterson. Maybe even, like you said, going to Joey Lucchesi, possibly a Jose Budo being, like that 4th extra starter. And when David Peterson just couldn't, I don't know what happened. He had a great spring and just could not translate that into the season when he got his opportunities. The problem is when these guys got hurt, instead of now having McGill and Peterson being just a 5th starter, now you're requiring them to be the 3rd starter, the 4th starter, and it just did not work, and they were not giving innings. I'm wondering, like you said, about Buck taking out a Senga so early. Are we going to have to come to a point where these guys are going to have to start eating innings? Like, even if they're just blowing up, hey, you're just going to have to stay in, get to 100 pitches. If we can get you to 5 or 6 innings, fine. Even if you give up 5 or 6 runs, because the bullpen is exhausted now.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to get exhausted by, the beginning of June, maybe July 4th, maybe at the trade deadline. We're at that point that they maybe could make a trade, but now we need reserves, and they're exhausted, and it's just awful to see. It's like that trickle down with if the starting rotation is not doing their thing, it affects the bullpen, and the bullpen can only hang on for so long. They had a great first month into May as well. And now we're seeing, the bullpen get tired. And, a prime example was they used, I think, David Robertson. I think they used him 4 or 5 days in a row. And this is coming off of him having such a great month, such a great start to the season. And now you're seeing a little bit of him starting to give up runs here in each of his, appearances. And it's probably because he's been used so much and he needs some rest. And then you got to go to Ottavino for 2 innings, and you got to go to Raley for 2 innings. And without Edwin Diaz, you got to keep going to these guys, and we're going to have like no bullpen by the time, the end of June comes. If the starting rotation does not go 5, 6 innings, I mean, I'm asking for 6 innings. If they can at least go 5, for goodness sakes, that would be helpful. We got 7 a couple of times already, and I'm grateful for that, but it has to be on a consistent basis because, the bullpen is just, tired, and we're getting, a lot of Leon, a lot of Brigham, a lot of, Nagosic, and one guy that really needs, I think, to me, to step it up is a Drew Smith. I mean, I expect Drew Smith to be a whole lot better than this. I'm expecting him to take the next step to being that, bridge guy, maybe being a setup man at some point, and he just has not done that.
Yeah, and it always looks like he's about to turn that corner, and then he hits a wall and he falls back hard. And that's the knock on Drew Smith used to be. You look up and his ERA was like a 1.8, a right around a 2, and then you start looking into the numbers a little bit, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, he gives up everybody else's runs, so it's not on his ERA. And then when he comes in big moments to hold a lead, he's not able to do that, or in a tie ball game. Those are the kinds of things that will make you a lot of money in the game of baseball, especially these days. If you can hold a lead and find a way to just get those 3 outs, finish off the 3 outs, not get 2 quick ones, or not give up the run, and then all of a sudden find a way to strike out the side. He just is so up and down with that. It's been very, very frustrating to see Drew Smith. And I think, again, this is kind of the embodiment of where we are with this Mets team. Who are the real Mets, right? Versus the Phillies and Blue Jays. They're 5-7 in their last 12 games. They've lost 2 or 3 to the Cubs, Rockies. They sweep the Phillies. They swept by the Jays. Like, this is a team that you see Buck Showalter and everybody when they're doing their interviews. They look so frustrated and exhausted. And we're only in the beginning of June. So that's it's one thing physically to be exhausted. It's another thing mentally to be exhausted because you don't have the answers. If anybody had the answers, then they'd have the fix, and nobody has the fix. So as we sit here on our podcast and, we can, give out information, we can paint a picture, we can try and do everything we can, but we don't have the answers. They don't have the answers. It's a frustrating situation because all everybody wants to do is win. But I loved listening to Pete today. You heard that frustration.
Yeah.
And that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. You want guys to be pissed off as well. It's not just the fans. Yes, the fans pay the money, but the players, man, you think he wants to go home thinking, I'm having a nice season. I have 21 home runs, but I'm also batting .230. Like, he knows he needs to step it up. And can he step it up? He's only going to have 4 at-bats. It's very difficult to do that in only 4 at-bats. So he's playing really good defense at first base. You heard Buck Showalter rave about that as well. And it's just a situation where it's going to take them, just like they did, against Tampa Bay when they started finding ways to win those games. And all of a sudden they won 5 in a row, and you think, oh, this is our team. This is what we've been waiting for. And then somebody let the air out of the balloon, and we're back to where we were just a month ago.
Yeah, and it sucks too because they're having to consistently kind of play those type of Tampa Bay games where they have to come back. It happened today, down 4 runs, right? They make the comeback. They tie it at 4.
Tie it up.
Right away, they give it away, and then the air's deflated for the rest of the game. As soon as the next inning, I always see what happens the next inning. How is the offense going to respond? And when they go down 1, 2, 3, that pretty much is the signal for me. I mean,
Yeah.
I probably would have been deflated. I'm pretty sure you would have been deflated as well when you were on the mound, having to, have given up a lead. So especially when they came all the way back, they hit 4 home runs to do it. Tommy Pham hit 2 home runs. Alonso now has the lead at Citi Field with 72 home runs in history. And then you have Marte, who, I was sitting yesterday watching the game at Citi Field and looking at his stats on the big board. I'm like, man, he only has 2 home runs this season. This is like not Marte-esque. And he hits one today. And I'm just like so happy to start seeing him. You're kind of seeing him as well. Hitting is getting a little better for him, taking better at bats, and the defense is getting a lot better. He made a nice catch in the outfield where I was worried for him for a while because I don't know if he slid into third against the Marlins and he hurt his neck. And I've been worried that ever since that time, that injury has affected him. And he seems now that he's starting to get a lot healthier.
Oh, without a doubt. It was something that affected him, and it affected every area of his game, right? It affected his defense. Even his reads to fly balls, he looked awkward, right? He looked like he was a little bit lost in some of his reads. This is a guy who can play gold glove caliber defense. It moved McCutchen out of center field so that he could patrol center field because he was such a great athlete. And yes, he's older now, but he knows how to play the outfield. And he just looked lost at times in the National Series. Remember that when him and Nimmo almost ran into each other? He kicked the ball and goes around for an in the park home run, little league home run almost. That's something where, you see he's starting to come around. He's starting to round into form. He's starting to hit the ball hard again. A guy like Vogelbach, I don't know what he's doing on this team. Yes, he got the only RBI for the team, yesterday, but he's those at bats just are not doing anything for you. They're not making you think that, he's about to turn it around, and he's got to find ways. The team has to find ways to, again, they need another spark. And unfortunately, the spark that we thought would be up and help this team, Mauricio, he got hurt down in AAA out in Syracuse. First, he hits this hellacious home run. It was like a driving iron off the hard deck and just is about 12 feet off the ground, left in a blink of an eye. And you're like, man, this kid is just so impressive, so big, so strong. And then he's covering second base. There's an attempted steal. Throw comes down. He goes to make the tag, and the guy's leg takes out his ankle at the same time as he's sliding by. He hits the ground. He's, in pain. Obviously, they help him off the field. He walks off under his own power. So hopefully it's nothing major. They say it's a sprained ankle as of right now. But, man, like when it rains, it pours, right? Because that's the spark that you want, because this guy is a 5-tool athlete right now. He's struggling a little bit at second base. The transition hasn't been as clean as they had hoped. He's making some errors. But I think DH-wise, if I need a left-handed DH, I think I would take my shot with Mauricio right now over Vogelbach.
Yeah, when I initially saw that play, I thought it was his arm. I thought he hyperextended his arm.
Oh, yeah. I cringed because I like, he gets hurt on this play. I'm like, oh, this isn't good.
Yeah, and then the report came out that it was just, a sprained ankle, and I was like, okay, I feel a little bit better about this now. But yeah, Vogelbach, when I think of DHs, and I'm not comparing him to, but I think of, David Ortiz, JD Martinez, those type of DHs. I don't say he's got to be the same exact production, but the DH to me is a run producer. He hits home runs. Man, even if he was something like a Matt Stairs off the bench, I mean, that guy always gave the Phillies power and helped them win a World Series. But Vogelbach doesn't really provide anything to me. I mean, he's not going to play on the field. Right. He's not getting any big hits. He walks a ton, but if he's going to do that, I kind of want him lower in the lineup. Maybe put him 9th, where him getting a walk, then going to Brandon Nimmo, maybe that can work off each other, getting more people on base. But, man, having him be the DH to bring in runs just hasn't been working. I'd rather honestly have Luis Guillorme back up here so he can spell Francisco Lindor, who desperately, I feel like, needs a day off or two. He is struggling mightily. He had 3 strikeouts yesterday, 3 strikeouts today, and I think he had 2 on Friday. That's, what were we talking about? 8 strikeouts? In the series, and he struggled on defense a little bit both days as well.
And it's that swing on pitches that are hittable. It's not the sliders out of the zone. These are sliders that are hanging in the middle of the plate, and he's missing them again. This is reminiscent of the first year of Lindor, where he was, trying to do too much on every swing. And I think, when he starts to struggle and the team is struggling, this is what he tries to do, right? He's trying to hit a 5-run home run. It's impossible, but he's taking those kinds of swing with nobody on base. So, things are a little bleak right now. I think it's to a man. Everybody is pulling on the same end. They're trying to figure this thing out, and as Buck Showalter said, big things are ahead. But what's ahead, and the reality that's ahead, is the Mets have the Braves coming up, and that next series is a tough one.
Oh boy.
You got Carrasco's going up against Elder, who has filled in not just admirably for Kyle Wright, but he's got a 1.92 ERA. You got Scherzer going against Morton, and you got Verlander going against Strider, who is undoubtedly one of the best young pitchers in the game. So you have a guy who's trying to keep Father Time away against probably the best young pitcher in baseball. So it doesn't get any easier. They're going to have to find ways to piece this thing together, find ways to score some runs, and find ways for this bullpen to keep leads and continue to win ball games. So again, exciting baseball is what we hope for, and especially meaningful baseball. That's later on in September, but exciting baseball, at least for now, so that you can have some hope, not like the first 2 games of this Blue Jays series where you just sat back and were like, this is really who we are right now.
Yeah, you talk about a tale of 2 different teams when it comes to the Braves and the Mets. I mean, anytime the Braves plug in someone, it literally works. Michael Harris last year, Vaughn Grissom, Elder this year. You talk about them adding these guys, and it just works for them. Whereas for the Mets, it never seems to work. And I'm pretty sure it's a talent evaluation thing as well. But man, it just always seems to come up roses for the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah, we'll welcome in right now Andrew Harts, our producer extraordinaire, the man of many talents, and of course my favorite student at the Nelson Figueroa Spanish Academy.
Listen, I'll take that as a compliment, considering how many Jake has gone through, and he still struggles a little bit. So, thankfully, we're not doing any Spanish Academy today. We don't need that. We need Jake for that entertainment. But it was the Hall of Fame weekend, though. Unfortunately, that's right. The Mets put a little damper on yesterday's ceremonies on Saturday, but it was really, really, really awesome to see the reaction that Howie and Gary and Leiter and Bud all got. Bud Harrelson, my gosh, Hojo got. It was really awesome to see that, and the fans showed up. You like to see that. And it's so cool to see a guy like Gary Cohen, a guy from Queens, or he just said, he goes, I'm just a guy from Queens. I'm like you guys. And it's that passion that I said it on the last episode too with Jake, that it's these 4 people are Mets. You know what I mean? Like Al Leiter played for other teams. Howie Rose used to call for the Rangers. But when you think of Hojo, you think of Leiter, Gary, how it's like, yeah, no, these guys are Mets. And I thought it was perfect what Howie said, going on and saying that he's of all the Mets players, executives, managers, coaches, he said, I feel like I am the most proudest Met possible. And, for a guy who never played whatnot, for him to say that he's a Met, it feels right. So I just want to get your guys' reactions on the Hall of Fame ceremony.
Yeah, I was there on Saturday. I was there yesterday, or Saturday. And I got to say, I got a little emotional when Al started talking because, I didn't get to see Hojo play. I was too young.
Hey.
Go ahead. But Al, I grew up with Al Leiter, and he was my ace. Everyone talks about Tom Seaver, Dwight Gooden, Santana, DeGrom, but me growing up, it was Al Leiter, and he came to pitch every 5th day, and he helped lead this team to 2 playoff appearances back to back for the first time in franchise history, and helped them get to the World Series. And hearing his speech was, it brought back a lot of emotions. Howie, of course, and Gary. And when I started watching, they were swapped, right? Howie was on TV, right. Gary was on the radio with Bob Murphy. So, that it's a great honor. And, every time these guys come up to talk, they always mention what Steve and Alex have done. And, from the old timers day, to the Keith Hernandez number retirement, to this. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see, David Wright at some point, who was there yesterday. That was a surprise to me. But to see the Mets honor this history, because, the fans, as much as, it's been a tough road for the Mets. You know, we do have our history that we latch onto and then love. So seeing them being honored was just amazing to me.
Yeah, and as a kid growing up in Brooklyn, I rooted for the Mets. Lived the dream we all dream of playing for the Mets, and I get to call those guys friends, which is just mind-boggling to me. Hojo was my hitting coach when I was in the big leagues with the Mets, so that in itself was crazy. And I remember I was talking to him, and I said to him, I said, "Hey, Hojo, I'm batting, getting ready to go ninth." I said, "Hey, what's this guy got?" And he goes, "What's this guy got?" He goes, "Just go up there, foul off as many pitches as you can." And I'm like, "No, dude." I go, "I think you don't know. I'm cut from a different cloth." I go, "I got to know what his out pitch is so I can take it away from him." And he's just sitting there looking at me like, "Oh my God, why are you wasting time?" And I'm like, "Dude, I don't play that game. I don't just go up there and take bad at bats. I'm trying to find a way to help my team win." And for a guy who was a middle reliever and, a back end starter, I had to do everything well. And so I told him, I said, I'm taking pride in this stuff. And I remember meeting him for the first time and how small he is. Because when I was a kid, this 30-30 guy who could hit bombs from both sides of the plate, and he also had speed, he was huge to me. He had to be huge. Like he swung a 37-inch bat in my mind, It was mind-boggling to meet him. And I stood there and I'm like, that's it, huh? And we laughed, and I got to coach with him. And it was me, him, and Barry Lyons. We coached fantasy campers. And I'm telling you, it's one of the greatest experiences of my life to be able to sit next to him and talk baseball and just to make him laugh and to be there. And we talk about, some of the times that we had together when he was coaching. And I think Al Leiter, again, he is one of the guys who epitomizes that blue and orange workman mentality, right? It wasn't that it was a sexy thing, but you knew it was everything he had every fifth day. It was going to be cutters in on your hands nonstop, fastballs elevated. It was going to be him punching his glove because he got an out, or if he gave up a run, he was punching his glove the same way with that same passion. So those Hall of Famers, I think they embody, and of course, Jay Horwitz getting put in. Everybody loves Jay, and everybody has, Jay has, I know I almost said it. I almost did the Jake. I almost said Jay has touched everyone in some way, but I stopped myself from being Jake Brown for a second and realized that, just Jay has been with this organization longer than anybody. And he has seen the ups and downs, and he has been a part of the inner workings of things. And, to see him in his capacity as the alumni ambassador, and everybody, he makes a phone call and says, "Hey, we'd like to have you come out and meet the fans." No matter what you were doing, you stop doing it. And you're like, "I'm on the next flight," because he's that special of a person. You do it for Jay. Everybody talks about the old regime and the old ownership group. This is different now, right? They're doing things because they were fans and they want to see players around the ballpark. They want to see those alumni. They want to see the Hall of Fame getting bigger because, players are deserving of it. It's not just to put, just put more numbers up there or try to retire numbers. It's still it should be a very difficult thing to do. But when you talk about a name like David Wright, it seems like the easiest thing to do next, right? I think he's somebody that has embodied as the captain. And if it wasn't for injuries, I mean, who knows what could have been, because he was a special kind of player and an even more special kind of person. So the Hall of Fame ceremonies were fantastic for fans, former players alike. I'm sure those guys were just overwhelmed with messages and well wishes, because muchly deserved. And as far as the two announcers, when you got put it in the books and it's out of here, those slogans that are forever ingrained in our mind on everything, no matter what game we're watching, you can hear that being said. Those are the voices that I would always want moderating my games, and even in my wildest dreams, I still think I can pitch, and then you have those moments of, oh my God, we're gonna have a chance to win a World Series. I'm gonna get a chance to pitch. Howie's involved somehow, and so is Gary making the call. So it was tremendous ceremony, tremendous weekend to do it. And I wish the team played better, but again, you can't take that away. The fans got what they wanted. They were there. They were supportive. And, I'm excited for, the continued I guess the bridging of that alumni and fans. Because like you said, you were too young with us old guys, with Hojo making the 30-30 club 3 times. Google it. That's that's what he would always say too. He's like, oh, you don't know what I did? Google me. That's one of the coolest things, again, is to know these guys, love these guys, and I couldn't be happier for that group of men.
Yeah, and you kind of teased it. You said, David Wright could be one of the guys next, and it's funny because I was looking back through the list of Mets Hall of Famers, and you're right, Figgy. Like it's a pretty exclusive list of guys, and there's a few who aren't in there right now, and I'm kind of curious on your guys' take. Who could be next, possibly maybe next year. It seems that the Mets, especially under Steve Cohen, has taken this initiative of honoring the past and paying tribute to the guys that made this organization. Let me get your feeling on guys like Carlos Beltran, Sid Fernandez, Jose Reyes, David Cone. Any of those guys you feeling like deserve to be in there?
I feel like they do. If they do multiple people in the Hall of Fame, they always do it from different eras, right? Like last year it was Matt Lack, Alfonso, and Ron Darling. This year they did Hojo, Al Leiter. For me, I kind of think David Cone needs to be in the Mets Hall of Fame. I mean, he was a really good. I mean, everyone talks about him because he won 4 World Series with the Yankees. But you look at his stats with the Mets; they were way better than his stats with the New York Yankees. And unfortunately, it came during a time where that run for the Mets kind of ran out.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he was an anchor for that rotation. So is Sid Fernandez. Both of those two deserve to be in the Hall of Fame to me.
Yeah, I think when you think of that era of pitching, those 2 guys embody, especially Coney was a young guy on the block and had to carry the torch, right? He was left to be the ace. Saberhagen came along, and Cone he was one of my favorites because of all the things that he could do with a baseball. He could spin it, he could throw it, he could be a power pitcher 1 minute, next minute he's over there throwing the Laredo, dropping down. So he had a flair about him, and I think he is a deserving candidate. Sid Fernandez, everyone you talk to, every pitcher you talk to who are getting accolades, when they are asked who was the most dominant pitcher like on that team, they would tell you Sid Fernandez with 88-mile-an-hour fastball, because he hid the ball so well, and he could pitch up in the zone, big slow hook, and he just I think he doesn't get enough credit. I think he's on the bubble as far as numbers wise, but I think the guy without a doubt that for me is going to go in and would represent the more current generation is Carlos Beltran. He did everything you could possibly do while in Met uniform, to try and help this team win. He was a special kind of player, one of the best switch hitting players of all time. And yeah, you don't want to just throw guys in there because, put your hat or your logo on them. Oh yeah, he was ours. The Mets have a long history of doing that with guys at the end of their career. No, they got Beltran at the right time, and he still had stuff left in the tank, and he did it. He proved it. So I think Beltran is a guy that I would definitely love to see in there. Trying to think if there's anybody else, just pure numbers wise. Nobody's jumping out at me right now, but
like to retire their number?
Yeah. Well, not to retire. No, not to retire the number. That's above and beyond. Like you gotta wait to do a World Series championship or something of that nature. So even if Pete Alonso wins the World Series champion, that's it. Retire 20 right there.
Although I do think that 5 is going to wind up there.
I think 5 is going to wind up there. It's the captain thing, right? It's the captain thing, and it is his trajectory was undeniable. There's nobody that's going to sit back and say, nah, he just didn't have it anymore. He was just a special kind of player that they literally built the stadium around.
And he stayed. He stayed when everyone else, hightailed.
He stayed. He not only did he stay, I think he also was the guy front and center, no matter what happened, good or bad. He was the first one that the media could go to. And it wasn't just for a cliche soundbite. He would tell you, we're pissed. We're very, very reminiscent of what you saw with Pete today. Mm-hmm. He would be the first one to tell you we're pissed. And behind closed doors, he's one of those guys that holds other people accountable. He talks to every single guy, no matter if you're a rookie or a 10-year veteran. He talks to you guys the same, and he expects. There's a level of expectation when you were around David Wright. It was, listen, I'm not here to just be in the major leagues. I'm here to try and win a championship. If you want to be with me, then raise your game. If you're just happy to be here, we can find somebody else who's just happy to be here. So I used to love that about David. Listen, this has been a fantastic episode, Anthony. I have to thank you so much for not just filling in, taking Jake Brown's place. Okay. Anthony Rivera 80 at Anthony Rivera 80 at Ant Rivera 86. Anthony Rivera, of course, from the Subway to Shea podcast. He's a tremendous asset to Mets fans with his podcast, and again to us. We owe you greatly. If you ever need our services, please feel free to not ask Jake to do anything. But I want to thank you for jumping on with us. You would like to plug anything? Please go right ahead.
Yeah, just the Subway to Shea podcast. That way. At Subway to Shea on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media. I also write for Rising Apple, Rising Apple blog. So you can check them out on Fansided as well. That's pretty much it for me. I just I can't thank you guys enough for not only thinking of me to come on the show, but it's been an honor to be with you, Figgy, Andrew, obviously, and Jake. He's been a good friend for a while for me, so I appreciate this. So thank you guys.
No, it was a pleasure having you. And again, we know that times are tough, but it sometimes takes some tough times to make guys realize that there's a little bit more that needs to be done. You can't just sit back and expect it to be just like last year. I think after 60 games, I think everybody's kind of getting that. Like, it's no longer, we've got plenty of time. It's time to kick it into another gear. We're now into June and looking to see what kind of push they can put. Remember, they're not too far out. If they find a way, not if, how about this? How about not if? When they sweep the Braves, okay, now where are they at right there? I think that changes that would change everything for Met fans. Here we are.
And that says goodnight to episode 151 of the Amazin But True Podcast, our New York Mets podcast from the New York Post.
Big thanks to Anthony Rivera from the Subway to Shea podcast for joining me today. And thanks to you, Andrew Harts, for not only being my producer, but being my friend, my confidant, and not being Jake Brown. Anyway, subscribe to Amazin But True on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to the New York Post Sports YouTube page to watch all the episodes. Find that Amazin But True playlist. Give us a thumbs up below on YouTube and comment below how you're feeling right now about the Mets. I think I know how you're feeling. But follow us on Twitter at Amazin But True, at FiggyNY, and at Jake Brown Radio. And oh yeah, don't forget, at Andrew Harts, HARTS.
I appreciate
it. You got it, brother.
And speaking of which, I mean, look, you made a pretty bold prediction. Sweeping of the Braves coming up. I mean, they see their old pal Spencer Strider, their history.
Oh, yeah.
This is coming after Jake made a bold prediction of saying 5-1. That really didn't work out too well. So how confident are we feeling about that 3-0 sweep?
It's not about confidence right now. It's about, I think it's out of necessity, right? It's sweep or be swept. That's how it seems to be going right now in baseball. Teams are starting to get to those days in summer where, you're seeing the wear going on the tread of the bullpens. The guys that you've been counting on are starting to, either get injured or look worn down. Look at we just talked about Lindor. Lindor needs somebody that can play shortstop and give him a day off. He should be getting a day off at least every 10 days, but you can't do that when you're struggling, and he's part of that offense that, was doing well for so long with Pete and himself with all the RBIs. So, there's a lot of things that are going wrong, but something's got to turn it around. And why not against the Braves when you need it in the heat of the battle? Maybe Buck has a speech up his sleeve, or maybe he has just a limerick a funny joke, something that'll ease the tension that's in the room right now, between the media and the Mets, because it's hard to keep answering the questions when you don't have answers. That's one of the things. If you've ever been married, Andrew, you would know that. It's very hard. It's very hard to answer the questions when you don't have answers. So
I have not, but I will heed your warning on that one. But no, look, I mean, I give him credit, and this is where Buck, I'd imagine him being the veteran manager that he is, where he'll be able to keep the locker room together and find a way to keep them loose. And again, there's no better way, like I said, to start off here with a 3-game sweep of the Braves, possibly.
Yeah, anything is possible. I think we're noticing that in baseball, right? The Tampa Bay Rays started out like they won 8 out of every 10 games. They've slowed down a little bit. The Yankees have made a huge push, being the best team in baseball over the past month. And, why not us? How about that? Why not us? It has to start somewhere, and it's not like you're going to get different players to be involved. It's the same nucleus that has to get the job done. So whether it's returning the small ball or just, finding a way to score one more run than your opponent, a win is a win. So I'm standing on a sweep of the Atlanta Braves, and we'll catch up about that on the next podcast on Thursday.
All right, Figgy. Well, for Nelson Figueroa, I'm Andrew Harts, and Jake Brown, he'll be back this week. Don't worry, you'll get you'll get your fix. I'm sure we'll hear plenty about the wedding in the Carolinas, but
at least as much as he remembers,
or as much as he remembers. Yeah. Or we'll see. But there's only one way to find out. Got to tune in for that episode. But Figgy, appreciate it as always, and I'll let you wrap it up again. Those 3 magic words that you always.
Oh, you can't say it. I forgot.
I'll
can't say it.
I'll this time, Biggie, for you.
Listen, Andrew Harts, of all the things, he's not perfect.
I'm not.
Okay,
I'm not.
ladies, I can tell you he's not perfect. He is a Yankee fan. So he has one flaw, but listen, I'll take it over. I don't want you to go. Listen, you have your religion.
I appreciate
Stay
it.
there. I got you, brother.
I'm loyal.
So from Nelson Figueroa and the Amazin But True Podcast, let's go Mets.